I could see she was beautiful. I could see she was beautiful. And then I asked to hold her. I said, well, I've got to hold her. And they brought her to me. And I said to her what I'd said, for so long when she was in the womb. I said, Jordan, this is your mom talking. She kind of stopped fussing, and I burst into tears. I just thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
One of the distinctive features of human infants is their helplessness at birth. Indeed, some scientists argue that the narrowness of the mother's birth canal makes it necessary for our babies to be born too soon. Other mammals are far more developed when they come into the world. For a newborn as helpless as ours to survive, it must solicit and receive help. It must connect with a specific adult it recognizes as mother. Psychologists call this process attachment, and it happens with such regularity around the world that it must be biologically based. It seems that the same biological clock that schedules birth 9 months after conception schedules attachment 6 or 7 months after birth. In this program, we'll look both at what leads to attachment and what follows from it. First, we'll examine the when of attachment, the schedule of events for both parent and child. During adoptions, when makes a difference. Then we'll look at who. Is it just mom or possibly dad and others who form this special connection? Then the where. What happens when a baby's at a daycare center? And finally, the why. Why does attachment matter so much for the rest of a life? When, who, where, and why. The dance of attachment. The term attachment describes a tie of affection that develops between an infant and its primary caretaker, usually the mother. It's a tie that goes two ways, from the parent to the child and from the child to the parent. Not too long ago, it was argued that the moments immediately after birth were critical to the attachment process. But these moments are very different for different parents.
More of an oh wow than oh, this is my daughter. I mean, it wasn't an immediate emotional response. It was more like, well, so this is what that was all about, almost a surprise kind of thing.
I remember asking the doctor, is everything okay? Does she have 5 fingers and 5 toes and everything she should? And they said, everything's fine. She's just a little bit slow to breathe. And I thought, oh my gosh, what if her lungs aren't developed right?
I cut the cord, and then the placenta was born. She was kind of ugly, actually. And I expected her to be kind of blue and a little bloody, but she was still ours.
Mostly, it was overwhelming on one hand, and I think I was real distant on the other, going, now this all can't be true. This really isn't my baby. This didn't come from Nancy. Get out of here.
I mean, talk about maybe the top 2 moments of all time in my life, and that'd be one of the 2.
These first moments of parenthood may create special memories, but are they special to the bond that a parent will form with a child? Might they even create special problems? Not according to Dr. Michael Lamb, an expert on attachment.
There's been a lot of speculation about the role of early contact between mothers and infants in the formation of bonding relations. My own assessment of the evidence is that there's no good reason to believe that there's something supremely special about those early moments. There is no good evidence that early contact really has a major impact on the formation of these bonds, and no evidence that if for some reason or another mothers are not able to have that early exposure to their infants, that this in any way reduces the quality of the relation they form with their babies.
Nor are the early moments critical to the other side of the relationship, to the attachment a baby will form with its parents. Human infants are just too immature to form an attachment at birth. But they can still solicit help. Crying is their way of saying, "Come here, I need you." Later, they try being nice about it. Dr. Lamb.
Babies give their first real smile or first social smile when they're probably between 4 weeks and 6 weeks old on average. The smile's really important because for many parents, it's kind of an indicator that the child recognizes them, is thanking them for something that they're doing. And it becomes an important part of the attachment relation because it functions as a signal. It tells the adult, I like what you're doing. Hang around. Stay with me. This is fun.
So I picked her up and put her on the changing table, and as I started to change her, she just gave me this huge grin.
And I ran and called my mom on the phone and said, oh my gosh, you won't believe she smiled.
1 month old. 1 month old to the day. Just broke into this thing. It was like the sun coming out.
How parents respond to the cries and the smiles and the other engaging behaviors of their babies determines the quality of the dance that begins later, when the baby is able to love back.
Most people argue that the attachment per se emerges when the child is about 6 or 7 months old. They use this age as the cutoff because this is the time when the baby is believed to be cognitively capable of representing individuals, of knowing that other people exist, knowing that when they are not immediately present, that is not visible or audible, that they actually continue to exist in some sense.
The when of attachment suggests something about the optimal time for placing a baby with adoptive parents.
The best evidence suggests that it's easier to place a child in a permanent home before it reaches 6 months of age. The reason for that is related to something I said earlier. If the baby is forming its first attachment by 6, 7, 8 months of age, then a move before that point allows the baby to establish its first relationship with the person it's going to be with permanently. If the child is placed with adoptive parents after that point, what it may have to go through is a process of grieving the loss of an earlier attachment figure before it's really able to invest emotionally in a new one.
The signs of attachment to a particular person are clear. The baby turns to that person when distressed and protests when that person leaves. The baby may cry when strangers appear. It's also clear that babies are resilient. Though it may take time, they can recover from the breaking of one attachment or from a delay in forming their first attachment. When a baby isn't normal, for example, attachment may take a while, a long while.
Actually, I almost hated my son when he was born. You know, it's really hard to explain, you know, because you're so mixed up because you're supposed to love this child. You just have this child and this is your child, but it's not normal and you can't send it back.
But sooner or later, in the second year, if not in the first, a baby and mother need to connect.
But then after a while, when that child finally, and it took him a long time before he could talk, and finally realizes that, you know, he says mom or he hugs you, and then it's all worth it, you know. But before that, it takes a long time before, it's like you're taking care of this person and they're not giving you anything back, you know, and finally they do.
It's a sign of our flexibility as a species that the formation of attachment can run behind schedule and still be successful. It's also a sign of the importance of attachment. A securely attached baby has what psychoanalyst Erik Erikson calls basic trust. It knows it can explore life because it can count on a constant, reliable somebody to keep it safe, fed, and loved. But who is that somebody, that special person? Can there be more than one?
To this day, I have no idea why I answered that ad, excepting it did say newborn infant. And for some reason, it just rang a bell. And I thought it won't do any harm to call.
The woman who went ahead and made that phone call is Iva Baker. The couple who had placed the ad are David Byington and Nancy Sundstrom. Because both worked, they were looking for a full-time babysitter for their 6-week-old daughter, Jordan. The story of Iva, David, Nancy, and Jordan is about the who of attachment. This is David.
I got a phone call one night, and the woman said everything I wanted to hear. Everything. She said, I don't need work. My husband died. I'm alone out here on the lake. I feel like I'd like to do something more productive with myself. I'm 68 years old, but I can keep up with anybody.
Before that phone call, David's wife Nancy thought she was a shoo-in for the Worst Mother of the Year award. She wanted to return to work but couldn't bear the thought of daycare. She had been discouraged by the responses the ad for a full-time sitter was drawing. But this response was different, as Nancy discovered when Iva walked in the door.
One of the things she did that just impressed me right off was she asked right away to hold Jordan. And just the way she took Jordan in her arms, I just said, I can go to work. This can happen.
And so, at the age of 6 weeks, Jordan began her dance of attachment with 3 partners: her mother, her father, and her sitter, her Nana. All 3 were there from the beginning. But her mother was limited. A leg Nancy had broken before her pregnancy wasn't healing properly. She was in pain and had to use crutches. Eventually, she required surgery. And so it was Dad who got up at night when Jordan cried.
You would sit out there, the world would be totally
true.
quiet, you'd be rocking that little child. It was just you and her and you giving her. I think he enjoyed it.
Oh, I'd say I loved it, yeah.
So there were moments when Dad was Jordan's attachment figure. Over the ensuing months, there were even more moments when Nana was.
Remember, she really started responding when Iva would show up before she did us. And,
That's very true.
you feel little twinges, or I felt little twinges.
Jordan was a little over a year old when Nancy and David went on a trip and left her with Iva for several days. They remember that Jordan didn't mind their leaving.
No, we took her over to Iva's house. She was into everything, checking everything out. Iva had all these things set up for her and a little bed made. Oh, she could.
We were hoping she'd say goodbye to us, is where we
she
were.
could have cared.
Which makes it real easy.
Her reaction made leaving easier, but incidents like this raised questions for Jordan's parents. Certainly, there were times when Nancy arrived home and Jordan ran happily into her arms. But there were many times, too, when Jordan chose Nana. Iva remembers one of those times when Jordan was nearly 1.5.
She'd have a series of shots, 3 as a matter of fact, about a month ago, and she did not, one was painful. I mean, her leg hurt. And she just was not her little self all afternoon, and I did just sit and hold her and cuddle her all afternoon. She just would not get off my lap. She just wanted to be held and comforted, which I did do. And that was one of the episodes when she did not want me to go home. I have seen her when she would not want her mother to take her, and her mother will be very hurt, and I hurt for her.
What has developed in this family is a pattern of multiple attachment. According to Dr. Lamb, it's not that unusual.
There's now ample evidence that babies not only can, but in most circumstances do, form more than one attachment in the course of growing up. Exactly how many and exactly how much interaction is enough is really not clear. But certainly many children growing up in this country today form 3 attachments in the first year of life: an attachment to mother and to father and to some consistent, regular attachment figure. So we've tended to, in this culture, overemphasize the mother-child relation and recognize the importance of other attachments.
In other cultures, multiple attachments are regarded as a safety net for the child. And though the 3 ties that Jordan has formed occasionally cause twinges for her parents, they are clearly not a problem for Jordan. Dr. Lamb.
I would argue that this is both healthy and advantageous, that the baby will develop a broader, richer, more secure sense of self in such a context, and that is really not at the expense of rich, close relations with the parents.
And both of Jordan's parents would agree. They are more than pleased with what she has learned from having 3 people take care of her.
The biggest and best thing to say is she seemed like a real secure kid and very happy.
I think she's secure, and I think she's going to have I think she's going to have a good deal of confidence as she grows up. I think she's going to know that the world is a good place, and there's a lot of love and a lot of warmth and security and fun certainly to be found in the world.
Just ask Jordan.
Look who's there. Who's that?
Nana.
Nana, that's right.
Who's that?
Who's this?
Daddy.
And who's this?
Mommy.
Nana, Daddy, Mommy. When Iva Baker answered that ad in the paper, she thought she was getting a job. Instead, she was getting a family. Today, the mothers of half the infants in the United States work outside the home. What was rare in the 1960s and unusual in the 70s became commonplace in the 80s. It's now a fact of life. Having a nana come to your home to take care of your baby sounds like the perfect solution to the problems of working mothers. But the question of where attachment takes place isn't so simple. Even if an in-home caretaker can be found, the financial cost is high. For many, the only alternative is daycare. 2 small words and 1 big worry.
It was her getting lost in the shuffle, or them saying, well, she's just a little baby, we'll put her, aside in a seat and let her watch everybody.
Really, all I have to do is, kind of look at the TV and read the paper from, a while ago, when all the scandal was of, beatings and
Sexual abuse.
What do we actually know about the effects of daycare on babies? Janice Gibson, professor of psychology.
Parents write to me continually about their concerns about daycare. What they're saying is something bad going to happen to my child because I'm giving him up for somebody else to take care of? The answer really is no. If, in fact, you get someone who will provide excellent daycare, the same kind of care that you would provide yourself.
Those are reassuring words. Something bad isn't going to happen to my baby if I find good quality daycare. But parents have other, sometimes unspoken anxieties. Professor Gibson has seen it both in our country and in the Soviet Union.
Daycare there starts at 3 months of age, and parents can stay at home full-time with full pay with their children until the time that their children go to daycare. But most parents I knew when I worked there made the decision that if in fact they could stay at home for the first year of life with their children, they would do so. They gave a variety of reasons, including the fact that children get bad colds when they're at daycare because they catch it from other children. But I don't think that's the real issue. I think the real issue is that the parent-child relationship is a very important one, not only to the child, but to the parent, and it's a very difficult thing for us to give up.
I mean, I want to be able to see their first step and hear their first word and all that special stuff. I don't want to come home, from the daycare center, having the daycare nurse or whatever tell me, oh yeah, Nikki took her first step or said something.
And that's a real possibility when parents are away all day. Parents should expect something else, too.
If, in fact, they decide they're going to send their kids to daycare, they had better be prepared for the fact that, indeed, their kids may develop attachment to the caregiver in the daycare center. This doesn't mean they're not going to be attached to their parents. It means it's going to be a little more difficult for their parents to deal with the knowledge that this is the case.
Some studies have found that infants in daycare are a bit less likely to form secure attachments to their mothers. But Dr. Lamb isn't so sure.
I think that the evidence for this is currently very unclear. There may be a minor increase in the likelihood that babies in daycare will have insecure attachments to their mothers. If there is, the increase is really a very modest one and does not alter the fact that the vast majority of babies, around 2/3, form secure attachments to their mothers in this country, regardless of whether or not they're in daycare.
It's clear that the who of attachment is related to where. An infant in daycare will probably dance with more partners than she would have at home. If daycare is good and consistent, that will be fine for the baby.
Smell my Mimi.
Oh, Mimi is so nice. Now, so you want me to do what to it?
Smell it.
Yes, I can smell Mimi. Do you like Mimi?
I love it.
Oh. What's Mimi?
It's a blanket.
Can I have it?
No,
Why?
because I don't want it. Can only sleep with it.
Oh, this is your blanket you sleep with.
Yeah.
And the blanket's name is Mimi.
Uh-huh.
And do you take Mimi with you?
Sometimes.
Do you love Mimi?
It's my favorite thing to hug it with.
When a child gets to be 3.5, you start to see the why of attachment. Why what happens in infancy matters later on. Whether a baby is attached to a parent or to some other caretaker, she eventually wants to be more independent. When she leaves mom or dad for a while, it helps to bring something familiar. We may call it a security blanket, but psychologists call it a transitional object. Professor Sheldon White.
But a transitional object would be a teddy bear, would be a rug, a favorite blanket that a child drags, like Linus, that the child drags along after him. A transitional object seems to be some kind of an object that fills an emotional space in the interval of time between when a child needs to be physically near the parent and when the child can be away from the parent completely with, I suspect, some kind of complete symbolic replica of the parent sort of within the child forever.
We could play with Bumblebee Lion.
Yeah.
Come on over, let's play with Bumblebee Lion.
Okay.
Isn't Bumblebee Lion nice?
No.
No?
Uh-uh.
Why not?
Because, well, he does nice to me, but he's not nice to other people.
Bumblebee Lion looks nice to me.
I know, but he only is nice to me.
Oh, do you like to squeeze him?
Yeah.
Yes. Where do
And
you-
my favorite animal to sleep with.
Oh, you sleep with Bumblebee Lion. Transitional objects are portable attachment figures, portable moms. They start to be important to kids at about 3.5. Professor White.
After about 3.5 or 4 years of age, the young infant doesn't have to be near the parent, but some kind of solid process of connection to other people exists, which I suppose in Erickson's terms forms a kind of basic trust, which then is a foundation for other social behaviors in the rest of the life course.
And what about the rest of the life course? Long-range studies have found that securely attached infants, about 2/3 of the total, usually do better as preschoolers. They're likely to be independent, self-confident, cooperative, and sociable. In challenging situations, they're more likely to be persistent and resilient. This is the main reason why attachment is so important. But the benefits of a secure attachment come only if a child remains in the same good rearing circumstances that produce the attachment in the first place. Consider what that means. It's tempting to think that the connection between year 1 and years 4, 5, and 6 lies in the child. If you're secure in your first year, you're secure later on. But it's just as likely that the connection lies in a consistent social environment. If your parents are good in their first year, they're good later on. We don't know for sure where the connection lies. Dr. Lamb's hunch is that it's in the social environment.
Now, the positive implication of this is that if a child has poor rearing conditions early on, that does not mean that that child is necessarily going to be asocial, uncooperative, overly dependent, unnecessarily lacking in persistence in challenging situations, because we know that if the circumstances of that child's living conditions change, that child may later start to behave like the earlier securely attached infants.
We don't have much evidence yet on the fate of attachment after the age of 6. We know that attachment figures change as we grow up, that we start to turn to friends and then to spouses. Still, we never lose the memory of those who are first.
there was a lot of people in the elevator, and everyone in our family got out except me, and I was getting out, and then the door shut, and I started screaming. I was like 5. And then my mom pried the door open, and then I considered her Wonder Woman for a few years after that.
I can remember my dad used to take us sledding up in the mountains every winter. And the one really bad accident that I had, I remember when I came to after being creamed by a sled coming down a hill when I was real small. And I was out for quite a while, but the first thing I remember is my father being there with me.
My parents lived with my grandmother and her husband for a while when I was about 3. And then they moved back in with us when I was about 6. And then we left the neighborhood, and so I continued to have that connection with my grandmother because I'd stay there and visit friends. So it was like my whole life until she died she was the significant person.
I remember it was Mom. It was Mom. Anytime there was trouble, or certainly in the latter years when my heart got broken in high school, it was Mom. And that's... now that she's, passed away, nobody to replace that. It's a tremendous void.
The lifespan perspective is now being brought to the study of attachment. We're learning more about when, who, where, and why, about how the dance begins, how it changes, and why it matters later on. To get a good start in life, we need that special connection. The connection goes 2 ways. It begins before birth for parents and at about 6 or 7 months of age for infants. It can wait for a while and still be effective. A baby can turn to someone at home and to someone at a daycare center. When it comes to attachment, the first year of life is important, but so is the second, the third, and all that come after. Early in life and late, we need to continue the dance.
There's a little child, and she's standing in the window watching for me to drive up and screaming, Nana, and how can you not love and want to be with a child that loves you back?